Movies. Horror movies. Because it's October, and that's all you watch in October is horror movies. We watched It, based on the Stephen King classic, which was, of course, a book turned into a mini-series, now turned into another movie, which will turn into a sequel of this movie at some point, which is a good thing in this case. 2 years. Okay.
September 2019.
I got the insider here. She knows it all.
Mm.
It was a very good movie. Very, very good movie. If, for some reason or another, you are not aware of the premise of It, which would be strange, it's about, these mysterious disappearances in town. In Derry, Maine, because every Stephen King book takes place in Derry, or at least in some location in Maine, because apparently Maine is the most terrifying state of them all. So these disappearances of children happen every 27 years, and all of that. And that's honestly the general premise. The original book and miniseries follows the perspective of both the main characters as kids and then as adults. Spoiler alert: they don't all die. They do have an adult storyline. And in general, there's not a lot to it outside of that premise, but with that premise, it does a lot of things within that. It's a coming-of-age story. It's a horror story. It's a fantasy adventure story. It's all these different types of genres that gather together to just make one kind of mega film that nails everything just properly.
Yes.
Thank you. Where do I even begin with this one, honestly? It was a full 2-hour length movie, adding on to that the fact that there is a sequel planned. That's a good, 4 hours of movie that will eventually be available. This one was great. It started great with the whole setup of the main characters, brother biting the bullet. I'm not even going to spoiler tag that because it's literally the first thing that happens, and there would be no story without this happening. I've seen a lot of people saying, actually, that they were kind of shocked by the opening scene just because so few movies dare to actually
destroy children.
Exactly. Show that kind of brutal violence towards a child. Like, the kid straight up lost his arm. It was, ripped off. He was dragged into a sewer grate. There was blood everywhere. It was a vicious opening. And it perfectly set up that feeling of terror that was about to come. In a way that definitely caught your attention, because no one else dares to do that, lest, the good old ratings boards try to run you out of town, but stuck it to the MPAA on this one, and they made it into theaters, so good on you, I guess. And that was sort of the general setup. The rest of it takes place, it's not even a full year after that happens.
I think it's a year after.
Okay, I guess it was a year after then.
I don't know.
Something like that. It takes place afterwards, not super long afterwards, and then it's just the general plot opening up, introducing the characters, introducing their relationship to the terror that be, which is, of course, personified as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Shout out to Tim Curry for his original fantastic on-screen portrayal of it. But also shout out, do you remember the actor's name? Say it again for me.
Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård. Shout out to him.
Dreamboat.
Not from what I saw, but okay.
Well, not in this.
He played a fantastic Pennywise as well. Tim Curry was almost more of a... he was scary, he was creepy, he was eerie, but he was almost like...
He was not really scary. He was just kind of...
He was almost too approachable, was I think the problem. The way that Bill Skarsgård played it, and this is, I think, just a benefit from the man being foreign himself, the way he spoke, and this is not a knock on foreigners, by the way, before someone takes that horribly out of context, just the way he said his lines was unnatural.
I think he's from Sweden.
Well, with a name like that, I would imagine. But yeah, everything that Pennywise said in the movie was just off. The accent was off. The cadence was off. No one speaks like that, ever. No one has ever talked like that. And he used that to great advantage to really show that this is not a person. This is not a clown you can trust. This is something far worse, and that worked very, very well. So yeah, he was less of a personified murder clown and more of a almost uncanny valley. You cannot quite really tell what's wrong, but there's something wrong, and that worked very well. Um, so while we're talking about actual like individual performances, let's go on to the kids because there were some fantastic performances from those kids. I'm not going to know any of these names, so I apologize in advance here because I did not study. Um, the main character, of course, Billy. Kid had a great stammer. Bill. Oh, sorry, he's not Billy. He's just Bill.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. His brother was Georgie, so I forgot which one had the Y at the end. Yeah, Georgie. Yeah. So yeah, kid who played Bill, very good. Had the combination of the feelings of hopelessness and determination, both kind of fighting each other. Not even so much hopelessness, actually. He was pretty determined the entire movie, despite the ridiculous odds that were thrown against him the whole time.
Well, in the first one, they know that Georgie died. Like, everybody knows that he died. And in this one, they made it so that the characters didn't know that he was dead for sure. They just knew he was missing.
Right.
So Bill, the whole movie, was like desperately trying to find him and
Right,
stuff.
yeah. Even though there's like probably that subconscious knowledge that he knows it, there's still that gripping on to any kind of hope that Georgie is still alive. So yeah, he did that very well. Nailed the speech impediment, spoken as somebody with a speech impediment that sometimes comes out worse than other times. Sounded great, performed very well. The other kids, to all credit to them, holy cow. Richie was hilarious the entire time. Just ridiculous, completely out of place sayings, which isn't out of place because they're kids. The shit these kids said was just spot on the entire time. You get a bunch of little kids in the same group together with no adults around, and it's no holds barred. Anything that can be said will be said at the most inappropriate time, and that was absolutely nailed, having been a kid at one point.
Well, they were all like 12, I think.
Yeah.
Around 12.
Yeah, which
So.
is like that's like the sweet spot of that age, honestly. That's like when they peak at their absurdity.
Yeah.
Eddie. It was Eddie, right? Eddie was oh my god.
The tiny one.
That was an amazing performance. Absolutely phenomenal from Eddie. Speaking like 120 words a second, just yammering on and on and on. A nervous wreck the entire time. Spot on the entire time. The only thing I wanted to see in that movie was more Eddie, and there was already plenty of him. I was like, give me more of this kid, because, well, for one, just a great written character. They just did a fantastic job with his lines and everything, and then just the way that he is portrayed was just so fantastic. I hope that kid goes on to do more stuff, because holy cow, he impressed me a lot in this one. The other kids, of course, Beverly was a pretty major role, being the token girl of the group. She did a very, very good job as well. They all did, honestly. Even the characters that really didn't get much of any time, like Mike, who practically was not a character, the black homeschool kid. He showed up for just long enough to
just be there.
Right, be there and do like 2 on-screen things.
Yeah.
I think he could have used a little more screen time in the end, but what he did well. They all did very, very well. I would not say there was a weak performance in the entire film.
That's fair.
Nice. Good. Glad we agree there. The overall atmosphere and feeling of it was fantastic too. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, the original It was not set in the 80s when they were kids, correct?
It was like in the 60s
I thought
or
so.
so.
Okay, yeah. So, a little bit of a time shift there, but it works because the 80s is still technologically similar enough to the 60s. If it were the kind of thing where we're done in the 2000s and they had like internet and cell phones and everything, at the risk of sounding like an old man, may have missed the mark a little bit. But because it was the 80s, they were still confined to riding their bikes around town, being a bunch of little brats and everything. It was it worked very, very well. The music choices were weird sometimes, but I kind of liked it too. You had everything from New Kids on the Block to The Cure to Trust. Like, just what a bizarre conglomeration of licensed music. I've heard some people say that they didn't always think that it fit. I thought it fit fairly well, actually. There was a bit of like a juxtaposition between what was happening on screen and then what was like playing over it. It's like, here's what you're supposed to feel, but instead we're going to play this for you so that you almost feel an entirely different way. Like there's a scene when they're playing, no. There's a scene where they're like cleaning up the blood in like Beverly's bathroom and playing a song by The Cure. I cannot remember the name of the song. It's from their Head on the Door album, I believe. Hold on.
I don't remember what it was.
I am probably going to get the song and the name wrong even if I look at it. Maybe it wasn't from My Head on the Door. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was like the goofiest, most lighthearted song in their entire catalog, and that was the song that they picked for this scene while they're like cleaning blood. It's just this very bright, bubbly little like violin synth parts going all over. It added a sense of whimsy to a scene that should not have had any whimsy to it.
Well, it was because they were all cleaning it up together and being friends and stuff. And
Cleaning up all this blood together.
yeah, it was like a whistle while you work, clean up the blood thing.
Which is, strange enough right there.
It was fun. It was part, like, they had the fun parts of the movie that didn't even feel like a horror movie.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things that I kind of wanted to touch on is when it was not a horror movie, I could have sworn I was watching The Goonies. Not even kidding. It was an adventure movie first and a horror movie second. It just so happened that the adventure aspects happened to be about something scary. Even the fear itself wasn't so much about being scary and about being horrific. It was more about portraying the feeling that children have about fear, if that makes sense. It was how children's fears are embodied, how they feel, how they can be abstract. Sometimes they're plain ludicrous and don't make any kind of sense at all. Yeah,
it was because it basically took on the form of whatever each child was scared of.
Yeah, like no adults could see it. They couldn't see the blood in the bathroom. They couldn't see any of those weird occurrences. It was purely what the kids themselves were afraid of. There's even a part kind of towards the end of the movie when they're trying to encounter it in the house it's in, and the more that they disbelieve the fear and the more that they refuse to be scared of it, the less things work out. Like, they open a door, there's nothing scary behind it because they don't believe there's anything scary in it. Stuff like that. It's really a movie about kind of conquering those irrational fears and just kind of being realistic about things, I guess, in a way. Not entirely, but yeah. It was very pleasant to see that was more the kind of direction that it went, because so many horror remake movies have a tendency to just kind of crank the horror up to 11 and leave everything else behind. This did not do that. This made sure that it is a movie about kids becoming friends, figuring stuff out, and by the way, there's a creepy clown who's trying to kill all of them.
Yeah.
And it worked out hugely well, I think. In the beginning of the video, I said that the movie being split up into a movie and a sequel is a good thing. To play on that a little bit, I think that it hugely benefited from having this movie just about the kids, because you were able to develop an actual strong relationship with the characters as kids. In the original It, at least from what I can remember, you don't quite feel that way because it's flip-flopping between the two stories so often. it kind of has to divide the screen time up. You're not seeing as much of them. You don't quite get the chance to feel like, hey, Eddie's hilarious. I freaking love Eddie.
And even when they're adults in the original one, you're like, which one of the kids was that?
Yeah,
I don't even remember.
exactly. So I think when the sequel comes out, having both of those stories divided into two different sides is going to be really, really big for it. I think in terms of giving it the chance to actually develop those characters and everything else. I lost where I was going with that, but yeah, fantastic through and through. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really wanted to talk about on it. Pretty much every adult in the movie was terrible, which I think, not like terribly acted, but just terrible, terrible people. I'm pretty sure that also played into the whole aspect of fear, and that like the true horrors in these kids' lives are like their own parents and the adults around them and everything. The main bully was an absolute psychopath the entire time. It's just like for how realistic most characters were portrayed, I almost thought the bully was almost a little too psychopathic. Cause like, I don't know.
He carves his name into one of the kids' bellies.
Right. It's like that's overboard. Maybe things were different in the 80s. Maybe bullies were all complete sociopaths that weren't instantly diagnosed and locked away for life. But I don't know. That almost felt like that's too insane. Like, yeah. Kids do horrible, horrible things to each other because kids are terrible. I don't know. He almost felt like overblown at times, which maybe that's the point. I'm not sure. Either way, though, I loved it. I legitimately want to call it maybe the best horror movie I've ever seen.
Wow.
And I mean, seriously. It's the best horror movie that I've ever seen because it wasn't so focused on being a horror movie. That's the main reason. It was focused on being a good overall movie. It wasn't trying to rely on cheap scares. The scares that were there were effective, but not like so overblown to where it was corny or anything. And it wasn't the scariest movie ever either. I didn't really ever feel truly scared when watching it, but that's fine.
It was just fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a fun movie about kids being murdered. Oh, yeah. If I had to give it a point or a score, which I'm going to do, I have no problem giving it a 9 out of 10.
Wow.
It was incredible. There was not a second that I wished I was watching something else. There was not one moment where I got tired of it. There wasn't anything that I saw in the entire movie where I thought, wow, that was dumb, besides maybe the bully. The only reason why it's not a 10 for me, honestly, is, again, I think some of the characters didn't quite get enough screen time, were a little bit underdeveloped, which felt a little cockeyed, but otherwise, extremely good movie.
I'd give it like an 8.5.
Pretty close. Okay. So, combined total, combining our two, if we're going to round up, 8.8.
Okay.
I don't know. No, great movie. Would highly recommend watching it. I can't even talk about it without making a pun, because it's just how the movie title is. Yeah. Best horror movie I've seen. She's not going to be quite as brave and say that, but
I've seen a lot of horror movies.
most of them not that great. Let's face it, horror movies tend to have kind of a lower general overall quality cap, probably because there's such a high risk genre that no one wants to put that much effort into them.
You just watch too many B horror movies.
B horror movies are the best horror movies, thank you. Anyway, yeah. That's
Rubber.
Rubber is a treasure. Careful, we're gonna review Rubber next. Anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Those were her 5 words on it.
It was good.
It was fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.